Hey everyone, how you doing this morning? So I've been surfing Netflix and I finally decided to click on the Midnight Club. Hope you did too. It's a great show. I've always been scared all my life about dying young and dying early. And I've never had to go through what these guys are going through or had a friend or anything go through this similar thing. So, all this is new to me and everything, but it I still have my fear of dying, but it's probably where I get my love for like criminal justice and stuff and death and dying because I'm so scared of it. But you gotta watch it, like a train wreck. You gotta watch it. And so this is a really good show about a girl who is really, really smart, gets through high school early, does works really hard. She's getting ready to go to college, and then boom, life hits her. She finds out she has thyroid cancer, and the movie starts off kind of making it, or the show starts off making it feel kind of simple, like, okay, you got thyroid cancer, we're gonna have to remove your thyroid, you're gonna have to miss a little bit of college, you can't start college right away with everybody else, your life is gonna get detoured for a minute, and then next thing you know, she's in the hospital, her head's shaved so you can tell she's gone through chemo. They don't show everything she's gone through, but now she's dying. It takes place in like mid to early 90s, so there's a little bit of internet there. And she goes on the internet and she finds out about this place where this girl had gotten a magical cure there. And so this is what drives her through the season is I'm going to get this magical cure. I'm going to get it. Which is sad and hard because this does put her in a very vulnerable place to be taken advantage of. And sometimes when we get so hard focused on things in life like that, we can get taken advantage of. And they portray this very well, how she gets taken advantage of. You can see it coming. Some of the show was fun because I did guess some of it coming. The first 3 episodes, I could guess what was coming. And then after that, the twists and turns started really taking heavy places, and I was like, hit or miss, I was like, am I going to get this right? Am I not? You know, and you could see it coming, though, that she was going to get taken advantage of. And luckily, things go her way. So, spoiler, if anybody hasn't seen Midnight Club, this is going to be spoiler. I woke up this morning. I decided I wanted to watch 25 Things You Missed. And I thought, you know what? I should do this live. Let's do this live together. Let's go through the 25 things we missed and talk about it. So, let's see what we got going on. Let's start our video and see the 25 things we missed.
Here's a little macabre thought experiment I'd like you to mull over as this video plays. What would you do with your time if you knew for a fact you were going to soon die? Now that's pretty heavy material, and on February 1st, 1994, Christopher Pike released a book exploring that very concept. The Midnight Club book has been expertly resurrected into the Netflix series of the same name, in which we get to fall in love with the stories and characters all over again. In a 10-episode season, we are introduced to a group of terminally ill characters who we see wrestle and cope with their own mortality by telling each other stories.
Oh, and I love these stories. Like, some of them you can tell that they are short versions of movies that we grew up with, and it's great. And these stories, can I tell you, Christopher Pike was just amazing when he wrote this book, when he thought about this, because I'm not a writer. I'm far from being a writer. I can't imagine writing something like this. I mean, I could barely write a psychology paper in college, and push through writing a good, 3-4 page paper for school. And to write a book and this well with these kind of stories, just, I cannot make up a story for my life, but I love it that these kids in their situation, a way to cope was to come up with these stories, and they're fabulous.
And spinning webs of conspiracy to alleviate the pain of impending doom. So to those before and to those after, here are 25 things you missed in the Midnight Club.
What I missed?
Spoilers are inbound, so continue with caution.
Yes, spoilers.
Number 1. Netflix has taken quite a few liberties with the adaptation of the novel. One of the main changes is the reality of the world we are watching. In the book, the haunts and the mysteries are far less important than the tragedy and growth of the characters. While the focus is altered for the show, the heart of the story being told stays the same. But one of the lost elements that we don't get to see played out is Alanka's attraction to Kevin. In the book, she believes they share an almost Hawkman and Hawkgirl-like relationship, being tied to one another throughout her many past lives. Kevin himself at one point starts agreeing, and after Anya's death with no conclusive signs of an afterlife, the book revolves around this budding past life romance, a deviation which also erases the master from the story. Given the book's more all-around grounded reality, the removal of one of its truly supernatural elements is a bold one, though the tighter focus the show has on Alanka's research into Brightcliff more than makes up for it. A fan of the book may be a little confused at the enlarged cast. Not only are we given 2 new characters to flesh out the world, in Mark, played by Zach Gilford, and Shasta, played by Samantha Sloyan.
Well, okay, spoiler, but Shasta turns into a really important character. I'm looking forward to seeing this more.
But the very spine of the narrative is given 3 extra vertebrae in the form of Sherry, Natsuki, and Amesh. In addition, the show takes place within the halls of Brightcliff, not Rotherham, under the watchful eye of Dr. Stanton, not Dr. White, but more on her later. These are all surface-level changes, and if you are a fan of the book, it is still the heartstring-pulling plot people can cry over. Cheesy horror for young readers and viewers are a dime a dozen, from Goosebumps all the way to scary stories to tell in the dark. Meaning, it's not hard to...
When I was a kid, we used to love those books and watch the shows and tell those stories, and when I was at girls' camp, I told, maybe I should turn off the lights one night and tell you guys a story from Scary Stories in the Dark. The way I used to tell it, the voice I used. My camp leader kept laughing and wouldn't let me get to the story because my voice was so good and so serious that she just... I actually got an award, an Alfred Hitchcock Award, at the end of camp. Everybody got an award for something they did, and I got the Alfred Hitchcock Award for the way I told my stories in the middle of the night at camp, so...
To see the similarities between The Midnight Club and Nickelodeon's 1990 release, Are You Afraid of the Dark? It lasted 6 years and followed a group of tweens meeting in the middle of the night in a club called the Midnight Society to tell scary stories. But that's where the similarities end, because the Midnight Club is far more about grief and romance, while Are You Afraid of the Dark has no real depth in the form of narrative stakes. If you're a fan of Netflix, you might have seen a little program by the name of Lock and Key, another magical adjacent drama involving secrets and ancient homes. Another thing these two share is a location. Brightcliff is the same house used in Lock and Key. The house was built especially for Netflix and makes Alanka's visits to the basement a little bit more intriguing. The majority of the differences in the 2 locations are mainly because of Zoic Studios, the VFX team. The first episode of The Midnight Club is chock full of jump scares. Granted, it is in the form of the characters actively making fun of the overused gag, but the Guinness World Records counts them all the same. If you couldn't guess, this episode holds the Guinness World Record for the most jump scares in an episode at a whopping 21 in well under 1 hour. Seeing how Mike Flanagan has gone on to say how much he hates using jump scares, starting off the show with a plethora of them might have been a smart play, giving the audience all the startles they want early on so the rest of their binging can be done in peace. Now let's get into those pop culture references because there are a lot of them. The show takes place in 1994 and we see Amesh in a game room filled with Atari, Tetris, and other classic arcade machines. He is even playing the Doctor Who pinball machine, which was released 3 years after the show's cancellation. Moving on, there is a quick shot of a Die Hard poster, and the music choice can only be described as not...
Well, they do, Anya, I don't know if they're going to say this, but she makes a Die Hard reference by doing the famous yippee-ki-yay line, and so maybe they'll mention it here coming up, but it's when her and Alanka are in a huge fight towards the beginning of their meeting, because Anya is one of those people, she represents one of those people that are dying that are angry and afraid to let you know that they're dying, that they're scared to die. So they take this anger aspect until basically Anya's last days, she starts freaking out about dying and showing her true feelings about I don't want to die. So it's great that they put that character and that aspect in there of, and we've seen it in different movies, which I can't bring off the top of my head right now. But you know, you do always have this character, and this actress plays it so well. She's just so good, and let's continue watching.
1990s dreamscape, with such jams as No Rain and Good Riddance. And when we get around to Spencer's story called The Eternal Enemy, there's a lot more to go. Temporal inaccuracies are the fodder of fake fans foregoing their suspension of disbelief. Yet, it still is interesting to note the release of songs and games in the wrong historical order. In episode 2, Amish laments his missing out on the PlayStation, a console released 3 years before the Foley Adieu episode of The X-Files mentioned only a few episodes later. And if Amish is such a big sci-fi fan, even reciting episodes to Doctor Who during the club meetings, he definitely knows, if not watches, X-Files. Not to tarnish the show in any way, of course, these small cultural nods are not important, and the mistakes are being pointed out just in the name of fun, much like the PlayStation Amish should already be playing. Who amongst you has the eyes and ears peeled adequately to spot 3 cameos and a reused prop amongst the intricacies of the show? Well, that's the quest Mike Flanagan has thrusted upon us viewers. Mike Flanagan has stated the mirror in his feature film Oculus is in the show, in a very inconspicuous place. And believe me, once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And if you're the Sherlock Holmes finding the mirror, then you could turn your talents to the existence of Kate Siegel, Hamish Linklater, and Carla Gugino, who are sprinkled amongst the cast either in voice form or as a background character. Take this as the opening of an I Spy book, and if you can find them, let us know in the comments.
No.
Ilanka's dream sequence halfway through the first episode gives us a few haunting images. The most glaring one is of the dead Midnight Club slumped over their chairs joined by a dark cloaked figure. A gruesome scene for sure, but also one that is directly taken from the book itself. The cover of the book has the 5 original members of the club all staring at the dark cloaked figure. In both cases, the mystery person strikes a pose that mimics the one often used for the devil in tarot cards. Now, I'm no expert, but the card seems to represent a whole lot of bad behavior, but one of which is living in fear. The reverse seems to be dropping the shackles of fear, which is a sentiment that the characters come to embrace throughout the show. Many audience members believe that the shadow is death itself, manifesting the untimely ends of each of the teenagers, while some actually theorize that the shadow is Julian, Dr. Stanton's long-lost son. The underpinning of the entire story is based off of a real-life fan of Christopher Pike. In an interview with Vanity Fair, Pike explains the sullen tale. A fan of his in the early 1990s was terminally ill with cancer. Her and her friends would meet up at night for a book club that often spoke of his works. Her parents reached out to him in hopes they could meet, and a pen palship was born. Pike even offered her sneak peeks of the Midnight Club when he was writing it. She declined, opting instead to wait for its release. Her memory lives strong in the book and the show. In addition, the group discusses stories.
Okay, so that's interesting. It's good to know. So basically, he did have a real life fan of his earlier works. I'm gonna see what all. You know, I love the Midnight Club so much. I'm gonna have to go look up Christopher Pike now and see all his other works. And that's cool that a real life fan wrote into him and became an integral part of these books. That is one thing that I love about watching these things you missed, or it should be did you know things, because I did not know this. This is a good not only did you miss, but did you know this facts about the books? No, I did not. And I'm going to have to read these books. I don't read much lately, but I need to get back into it.
Is not too dissimilar from their real-life counterparts. In the Midnight Club, Kevin's stories are extremely similar to the 1993 novel by Pike himself called Wicked Heart. Wicked Heart follows a demonically possessed Dusty as he plots and murders those around him. Dusty unfortunately finds himself infatuated with his classmate Sheila, and it wouldn't be a teen murder plot if he didn't have to kill his love interest. It's hard to not see the parallels between Dusty's burden of murder and Kevin's struggle with his own maternal relationship. Indeed, a dark and frightening tale recontextualized.
So I guess what they're saying is the stories that the Midnight Club tell in the middle of the night, am I hearing this right, is some of Christopher Pike's other works, which is interesting. I want to know, because I loved most of the stories. I loved the car one, and I like the witch one in a way, but I don't know how I feel. How did you guys feel about people trading lives for other people? Like, I don't know, because I don't know if I was that witch, I would feel really bad for the mistake I made, but I don't know if I would trade my life to correct the mistake, because she has this power that, I mean, seeing the future, I love books that do premonitions and stuff, because if you've always noticed, the main person that gets hung up on the premonition, and the more they try and make it not come true, the more it comes true. And the harder they fight the premonition, and it's like, oh, don't fight it so hard because now you're making it come true. If you do this, it's going to come true now. And so she was warned about, okay, if you, and it was simply put, shown with a simple, okay, you stopped the boy from hitting the girl and the ice cream falling, but now she hit a rock and the ice cream fell. Life corrected itself, and we've seen that in other works too, that life will balance out and correct itself. If you raise the dead, somebody else has to die. And I'm trying to remember what show that was, that somebody rose the dead, and then they were worried which one of their loved ones was going to die next, because, oh yeah, that was Witches of East End. She rose her aunt from the dead because she didn't know her aunt had 9 lives and was gonna raise herself, and now it's gonna cost her someone she loves. And of course it costs her the guy that she doesn't want to admit that she loves. As she finally once she admits it, he dies. And spoiler for Witches of East End if you haven't seen that, but it's just crazy. I love those future premonition stories, because you're just like, you're gonna make it come true. You're gonna get fascinated with it, and now it's gonna come true.
This as an in-depth discussion of guilt. The year is 1988. One Christopher Pike just released a book in the style of noir. The title, Gimme a Kiss. A sorry tale of diaries and backstabbing, revenge leading Alice to a series of manslaughter and cover-ups, a bloodbath of youth and betrayal. Fast forward 34 years and the Midnight Club adapts this story into Sandra's, obviously with slight changes because the stories act as an emotional outlet for our characters. Sandra uses this platform to expound on her current fight with Spencer, and it proves a good point to commend the show's use of Pike's novels because it gives every episode its own unique angle and keeps it fresh hour after hour. Which brings us nicely over to Amish's story. It follows Luke, the love-struck programmer who is given an insight into what his future may hold. Of course, this is another one of Pike's novels, but a more watered-down version of it. Not only does Amish omit the idea that the enigmatic lights in the realistic video game were aliens, opting to conclude that the Illuminati were angels, his focus is far more personal, because the ending of his story directly mentions death days, which he just survived himself, and living with the idea of not knowing when your time is up. Not to mention his very own sci-fi story has a gamer protagonist kind of not really sort of getting the girl of his dreams, and that's an ending Amish thankfully gets as well. Ilanka, of course, is holding out the hope that her tumors will leave her body entirely. So when it's her turn to entertain the group, a story of a healing witch who can predict the future must have been a no-brainer. The theme of Ilanka's story, based on the Christopher Pike novel by the same name, acts as a sad foreshadow. The idea that fate is set in motion and death is unavoidable is a hard pill for any teenager to swallow. So the incorporation of her tragic optimism and guilt over Anya's inevitable death highlights the story with a very bittersweet context. Number 15, Road to Nowhere. This next
That was a
section
good
deals
one.
with themes of suicide and depression, so viewer discretion is advised. Natsuki shares her story with Amish alone when the library is locked. It is a retelling of Pike's 1993 book of the same name. It departs from the plot by keeping the story more contained and making sure it stays true to Natsuki's life. It's a harsh look at the inner turmoil one goes through when wrestling with dark thoughts. Freedom Jack, prying on her darkest moments, urging her to stay on a self-destructive path, leads to questions that have troubled great minds for generations, so please take Albert Camus' thoughts to heart. Death is of no use. It holds no greater meaning in it than life, and in life you can still create your own. Moving on to number 16. On a much less somber note, The Eternal Enemy is about cyborgs and
Terminator.
time travel. The Eternal Enemy makes up Season 1, Episode 9 of The Midnight Club, and again is based off of the Christopher Pike novel called The Eternal Enemy. However, Flanagan adapted the Pike novel to better fit Spencer's storyline. Instead of Rella, we have Rel. And unlike in the book, Rel witnesses Chris's death, not his own. Spencer's inner torture is due to the guilt he feels over his boyfriend's death, and this manifests with him playing the role of the robot sent back in time to kill him. This plot point is almost given away the moment we see his bed. Movie posters of RoboCop, Terminator, Back to the Future, and Time Cop, the pillars of all great time travel movies.
Yes.
The term Pythagorean teaching is used by Regina Ballard. She says it
Although I was so young when I saw Terminator 1 and RoboCop that I don't remember them, and I don't think I've ever seen any of the Terminator sequels. Should I watch them? Should I? Because there are, you'd be surprised at some of the movies I have seen and haven't seen. Like, I've only seen the first Die Hard movie maybe, but I just can't really remember it. Maybe, but I haven't seen the series, and I haven't really seen Terminator, and I've watched like the first Jurassic Park, but not really the sequels. And what else is it that's surprising that I haven't seen? Yes, I've seen Star Wars and stuff like that. Okay, so I'm not that lost in movies, but there's some movies out there that are typical that people are like, oh yeah, it's classic, you had to seen it, and I'm like, I haven't watched it. I've watched the first Aliens, but not the sequels. But I played StarCraft, which is like real life. But I've seen some of the sequels, not all the sequels, but some of the sequels, because when you play StarCraft, I mean, you have to watch Aliens, because, well, I mean, when I was playing StarCraft in 2005, we figured out that it was the movie Aliens and Prometheus or whatever, like, would, you know, all those movies, like the Zerg, and because we were playing with the SCVs, the human SCVs, and we're like, wait a second, isn't this Ridley in that big machine at the end of the movie? And we're like, yeah. And then we're like, wait a second, some of the lines in StarCraft are from it. And then we watch it and we're like, yeah, that's a StarCraft line. We're like, that's another StarCraft line. We're like, oh my god, we were right. You know, Aliens is StarCraft. And so I've seen some of those movies. I'll have to think later. Maybe I'll have to do a whole, I haven't seen these movies. Who wants to watch them with me and then review them with me for the first time? I was born in the 80s, but I haven't seen all the classics that you're supposed to see. I'll have to think on that later. My memory's slipping, and so I can't remember. It used to bother me a little bit. I used to sit there and think, should I watch this? Because this is something that everybody's seen that I haven't seen. And people reference and stuff, and I'm just like, I don't know, I just didn't grow up seeing it.
It has both esoteric and exoteric teachings, which literally makes no sense if you think about it. How can ideas be known to a bunch of people and a few people? But whatever, it doesn't really matter. Her whole idea here is to get people feeling comfortable when she speaks with them. And truly, it's hard for me not to make the connection between the cult in the Midnight Club and the ancient Greek cult of Pythagoras. And believe me, if you don't know about the cult of Pythagoras, they're all primed for a good straitjacket, if you ask me. They had the idea that the soul was trapped in the body, forced to reincarnate until they become one with with the gods. This
Huh.
was a central tenet of the
I mean, I know
Pythagorean
some
belief
of that
system called the
theory, but not
transmigration of the soul.
that
Back in the
end
book,
part.
Alanka actually believed that her and Kevin were part of this ancient cycle. And perhaps we'll see more of these ideas played out if there ever is a season 2. Anyways, let's keep moving. Writer and director Mike Flanagan has a history of reusing actors that he's worked with in the past. Of course, this isn't uncommon for directors. Think about
No.
Quentin Tarantino and Samuel Jackson, and even within the horror
And Tim Burton, how many times? And Adam Sandler. That's what made me really like Adam Sandler movies, was the reuse of actors but in different roles. And so it was cool to see an actor take such a different dramatic role in a different movie. And so, Adam Sandler had his team of people, and they would make a new movie and then just switch the roles, and everybody would get to play a new different kind of part. Nobody ever got tied down or typecast to one type of character. And so there's actually a few directors that do this, that once you get to know a director really well, okay, like Sam Raimi uses Bruce, what's his name? He just appeared in Spider-Man also. That he's appeared in The Evil Dead and other things, and The Car. And I mean, there's a good lineup of directors that go on to use the same actors. I mean, off the top of my head, I would have named Tim Burton. He's the top one that you're like, okay, if you watch a Tim Burton movie, you know it's gonna have Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter in it, and yeah.
genre, think about Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
in
Bruce
terms
Campbell,
of Mike
that's right.
Flanagan, there are
See,
a lot
Bruce
of them,
Campbell.
so buckle up. And first, we'll start with Matt Beidel. He plays Ilanka's scruffy father in The Midnight Club, but he may look familiar as the much scruffier handyman in Midnight Mass. He'll next be seen in The Fall of the House of Usher, another one of Mike Flanagan's creations based on the works of Edgar Allan Poe. It will feature themes
Love
of
Edgar
madness,
Allan Poe.
family, isolation, and
When I was in 8th grade English, we learned about Edgar Allan Poe and his tragic past of every woman that he admired or fell in love with just died early. But back then, in those times, it wasn't unusual to live a short life. And he just had a really hard time with that. And well, he lived around death because for recess, they would go dig graves, and that was a typical thing, to be in a graveyard and dig graves. And I mean, he had led such a tragic life. I mean, it's no wonder that he could write such tragic stories when you find out who he really is. And that was one of my highlights of some of my 8th grade memories. Was English was one of my favorite classes besides history. I'm a huge history buff, and kind of English, because learning the tragic stories behind all these storytellers and poets is just amazing. Once you find out who they really were, you understand where they got their imagination and stories from. And you're like, wow.
and metaphysical identity.
Well, and the worst part is a lot of them didn't become famous till after they died. They never got to get the money off their fame, and their works eventually just became free to the world, and we can use their works without paying royalties to anybody, which is sad that they live such these tragic, poor lives, yet they're so dearly loved. Like artists like what's that guy that cut off his ear that everybody knows? You're probably saying it right now, and I'm trying to think of Vincent Van Gogh. Wasn't appreciated in his time. And was it Leonardo da Vinci that was semi-appreciated in his time, but a lot of people, probably accuse him of being a witch or something or whatnot. And all of his inventions nowadays were like, wow, this man was ahead of his time, and he's so great. And it's just crazy how some people cannot get appreciation in life, but after death, they get so much appreciation that, you know, had they gotten that appreciation in life, would they have lived longer? Um, would Edgar Allan Poe have died drunk in the streets? His death is crazy. I've watched a show that went over his death, and I mean, he might have been murdered. He might not died a drunk in the street that everybody thought he was, and um, there's like a whole mystery surrounding his death. Like, it could have been murder. By a political murder. It could have been murder by like his wife's brothers. Like, I mean, if it wasn't, I mean, he couldn't drink alcohol after a while because his liver or something, and so like he had to quit drinking alcohol because it was gonna kill him. Yet he was found, dead drunk in the streets, and some people think that he was forced to drink all that alcohol. Um, it was a political thing, like vote and you get a drink. And they made him vote multiple times in different outfits. They would redress him in a new outfit, have him go vote, and then drink. So instead of like using dead names to, win an election or something, they would just use the same person like 10 times over and just give him a free drink after every vote. And so that was crazy to learn that, that might have been his death, a political thing.
Entities. And all that sounds like an average Tuesday for me. Alright, moving on. Samantha Sloyan also makes multiple appearances within Mike Flanagan's work. She appears in Midnight Mass as Beverly, and her first appearance working with Flanagan was in The Haunting of Hill House. In addition, she plays an unknown role in the upcoming Mike Flanagan creation, The House of Usher. Keeping on this Midnight Mass train, it leads us right over to Rahul Kohli. He plays a time-traveling game designer in the Midnight Club, and he will also be making a big appearance in, again, The House of Usher. Next up, we got Igby Rigney, who has stolen the show as Kevin in the Midnight Club.
Yes.
But like many others on this list, he was brought over by that other event at midnight. Zach Gilford plays Mark, the nice orderly that Spencer has an active disdain for during the early events of the show. If I were to take a guess, Spencer might have watched Midnight Mass and still doesn't forgive him for the drunk driving accident. The difference is Riley Flynn is probably suffering from the same hallucinations as Alanka. Nevertheless, Zach Gilford plays both roles with a charm, so when he returns for the House of Usher, we have our fingers crossed for more. It does strike me as a surprise that Sandra, played by Anara Simone, butts heads with so many of the other terminally ill teenagers because one would think they built up a pretty nice chemistry over on the set of Midnight Mass, which I promise you will not hear about again. Let's revert to the fall of the House of Usher, the upcoming...
Maybe that's why she was the one, spoiler, that ended up she's not going to be in season 2 because she ended up being the one that miraculously, either her tests were wrong or she miraculously, like, and that happens. Sometimes the cancer can retract, and they go into that in the show, how some people can go into remission, and it happens. I knew a lady that had stage 4, and one of the things we told is when you get cancer, sugar actually feeds it. And so if you eat, there's like specialty Canadian natural syrup that you can eat that does not feed cancer. And, if you quit all sugars, there's a chance that, I sadly know a guy who, he would every morning for breakfast eat a king-size Reese's Pieces, or not Reese's, which has 4 peanut butter cups and a Monster drink. And he ended up getting this unknown colon cancer. And he was told that he had like a year or something to live. And my mom and everybody, that's how we learned about cancer. We were a huge advocate. This was when I was pregnant with my daughter at the time that this was going on. And she's 11 now, so this was like 12, 13 years ago. I mean, we held dinners and fundraisers for him. And this is sad because, we did everything we could to help him get over the cancer, and then he ended up he had a son, and um I can't remember if his current wife was pregnant or not. They were going to get a divorce, but then he found out he had cancer. She stayed with him, and I was really upset after he died. I They put a monster and Reese's on his grave, and I was like, why would you do that? Because that's what kind of gave him his cancer, and cancer didn't run in his family or anything, and he got this unknown colon cancer. And by the time he found out about it, I mean, it was just really bad. And my mom advocated and everything for him, and she's like, if you quit all the sugar and stuff, and we were told that he was taking care of himself and everything. And then after we died, we found out that every morning he still ate Reese's and Monster up until the day he died. And then I was really angry at him that we did everything we could for him. Raising money, gave him support, everything. And he wasn't even really related to us. It was my brother's girlfriend that they had a kid together. It was my brother's girlfriend's sister's husband. So, I mean, it was kind of a far relation from us, but we did everything we could to help him. And then I was angry at him after he died because why couldn't he just quit this one thing that could have saved his life? If he wanted his life saved so bad that we did all this fundraising. I remember taking my newborn daughter to the spaghetti dinner we did, and I didn't stay at the spaghetti dinner for the dance, and everybody was mad because they did the boot scoot and boogie, and I'm the only one who knows that dance. And they're like, Rose, you left early, and nobody knew how to boot scoot and boogie because you left. And there was just a lot of things going on in my life, and I didn't want my daughter there, and I just had a baby. She was only like a week or two old, and so I went home early. And I mean, we did so much for him only to find out he couldn't do this one thing for himself. And how does that make you feel when you help somebody, you do everything in your power to help somebody, and they can't do the one thing that could have possibly, I mean, if he would have at least tried it for that year, for 1 year, if you could have at least made a commitment, and he still died, then at least he tried. But he didn't even try. He just kept his habit going, which, you know how much sugar Monsters and stuff have in them, and then Reese's, and you're eating that on a daily basis, and I mean, that can't be healthy, and that can't be good for you. And it's just really sad that things like that happen. That um, I don't know, I don't know, and to this day, I don't know how I feel about it anymore. I've kind of forgotten him and everything until till kind of now. I haven't thought about him in years, but I mean, we did everything for him. Why couldn't he just change his diet for a minute? You know? Cuz my mom did all this research, and then somebody got up later on after he died. Somebody got up and gave a talk about how they had stage 4 cancer, and they quit all this sugar and stuff, and they changed their diet, and they changed their lifestyle, and the cancer went away, and she's in remission, and she's doing great. And it just made me think all the more about this guy that couldn't quit the Reese's and Monsters, and how he could have lived for his son and could have had a life and everything, you know maybe I don't know if it works for everybody. I don't know if anybody knows anybody that has cancer and they've quit the sugar and it works for them. But there was a lady in our church that she got up and gave a talk about how it had helped her stopping all the sugar and changing her life. And I don't think she's ever gonna go back to the sugar. And one time went up to Park City and we were at the World Market and my mom was showing me, see, this is where you can get this natural Canadian syrup that you can put in things that will sweeten it, but you know it's not the same sugar as sugar. And this is something you can eat if you get cancer, and so you can still have something sugary, but it will actually help you instead of feed the cancer, because cancer loves sugar. And so I did learn a lot about sugar when or cancer when he was dying, during that year and a half that he had cancer.
Flanagan project that we know has been teased throughout the Midnight Club. But how? Actually, only Flanagan knows. He
Well, the sad part is, I don't know if I should say this, but I mean, him and his wife were gonna get a divorce and they hated each other. And the only reason why they stayed together is because they didn't want to get a divorce while he had cancer. Divorces take time, and he was cancer treatments and everything. And so I don't know if she really even cared that much about his life to say, hey, honey, you need to stop the Reese's and Monsters. It's killing you. And so that's a sad thing. Is I've known a couple people in this life that I think they've killed people on purpose to get attention. And I don't know if I should talk about their lives because I mean, that's what I hate about, studying human behavior and seeing human behavior. And uh then all of a sudden you see things that other people don't. Well, some people do see, like there's this woman, I think she killed her 3-year-old on purpose, accidentally, on purpose. She let the accident happen and her 3-year-old died, and she did it for attention. And I wasn't the only one who noticed it. And the people who noticed it, she cut them off of her Facebook, and she was ranting and raving one day about how people think I purposely killed my 3-year-old. And I was like, yeah, you did. I was like, but I'm still today on her Facebook, and I don't know why, and I don't really pay that much attention to her. And I feel bad for this 3-year-old that died so that she could have all this attention that on Facebook that she wanted, because it started out that she had a friend who had a 4-year-old that died of cancer. Well, he got over cancer. He was in remission for like 9 months, but when you go through chemo, it like strips you of your whole immune system, and he got the flu and died. And that was really sad because this kid kicked cancer's butt. And then he dies of the flu. And that was horrible. And then when she was growing up, her brother died. So she used to get attention for her brother's death for years on Facebook. And then her friend's 4-year-old died. And then she started getting attention for her friend's 4-year-old's death and her brother's death. And she would post about their deaths all the time. And then she had a 5th kid that she wasn't really happy with, and he was the wildest of them. And she would complain about him on Facebook and stuff. And then he died when he was 3, and now she feels bad that she used to complain about him because now he's dead and how much she loved him. And she told the story of his death, which you could see how she let the accident happen that led to his death. And now she doesn't need her brother's death or her friend's 4-year-old to get attention. She has her own son's death to get attention. She talks about after her son died, she left her religion. She still married to her husband, even though they hate each other and they fight all the time. And I feel bad for the husband because I don't know if he realizes what the wife did. And I don't know. Let me know if you want to go into that story. It's a really sad story. It's a crazy story. And um I just she did it all for attention. And it's been over a decade. And what's the sucky part too is her 3-year-old died on my wedding anniversary. I was at the store picking out steaks and ice cream because we were just gonna make dinner at home when I got the text that he died. And it's yeah, I had a hard time with spending my anniversary with my husband, knowing that um, this 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 friend of ours, baby, died. And um, it was just a hard time for me. And also knowing that I don't think he had to die, poor kid. I don't think he it's a tragedy. I shouldn't talk about it too much, but you know, let me know if you want to hear that story. It's insane, and judge for yourself what you think happened. If do you think she purposely did it for attention, or do you think it was a real genuine accident, and now she's just getting attention off this genuine accident over a decade later? Every single one of her Facebook posts are about this. And I know it's really hard when a kid dies. I haven't had one, and I hope to God I never do. I've had close calls with my kids a few times. I mean, my daughter's had her appendix out already, and that was scary because she kept faking that she was okay because she didn't want to go to the hospital because she hates doctors. And I finally stepped up and said, "No, you're not okay, and I'm taking you to the doctor." And thank God I did, because they rushed her into surgery and got her appendix out. And that was scary. The 2-3 hours waiting for her to get out of surgery, they caught me peeking in the recovery doors because I needed to know that my daughter was okay. And so I've had close calls, and thank God I haven't had to go through with that. So, I can't for sure say that, over a decade later, you're going to still post about it and still be angry about it. Some people, I guess, do. Some people aren't. I don't know. I mean, I luckily haven't. My parents are still alive. My siblings are still alive. Um, my kids are still alive. I haven't had to have I've had friends, moms who died when I was a kid. You know, I've experienced death through people, seen it through people. Maybe not experienced, but seen it through. I can sympathize with people, but not empathize. And like when my great grandma, I was closer when I was little. When she died, um, everybody's like, "Well, she was 92." or or was she 94? She was in her 90s. And so everybody's like, well, she was 94. And they said when she turned 92, she stopped playing her violin and she started going downhill. And so nobody was surprised that she died. And so her death was handled as it was her time. Don't be sad. And I had a couple dreams of her the week after she died. Um, and then after I got married to my second husband, I had a few more dreams with her in it. But I never really processed her death because she was in her 90s. It was her time. And my grandfather died I think around age 65. I my I was at girls camp, and we had the opportunity to either go home in the morning or stay an extra few hours, and I opted to stay an extra few hours, and my sister went home. And I walked in the door holding all my camping gear, And the second I walked in the door, my sister goes, "Grandpa's dead." And I was like, "What?" And that's how it was handled. And so while I was at girls' camp having fun, my grandpa died, and the news was broken to me by my sister just shouting it out when I walked into the door. And I felt like I wasn't given an opportunity to process it okay in a healthy way because I was told in such a rude way. And I am going to tell a story later. It's been on my mind for 3 weeks now. I do have a friend that was murdered, and I am going to tell her story. I've just been waiting for Thanksgiving and everything to be over and my kids to be in school and to have time to tell this story. I mean, hers is the only death I really got to process. Um, of somebody close dying to me was her murder that happened. My son is 6 years old now, and I was 6 months pregnant with him when she died. And I will tell that story, so I don't want to say anything right now about it because I am going to tell her story. Um, but like, I didn't get to process my grandfather's death or anything because, like I said, I was told in such a rude way, and no one else was home at the time to talk to or anything. And so I didn't get to process it correctly. Yeah, let's get back to the video. But anyways, I mean, that's just, how death has kind of gone for me is that, well, I've had my dad's friend. My brother, I came downstairs and he told me that my dad's friend had died, and I said, "You're lying." And my brother started crying, which my brother never does. He's a man. He doesn't cry. And the second he started crying, I knew it was the truth. And I watched my dad and my brothers process his death, and I mean, he just made a stupid mistake and died, and left behind a son and everything, and it was just horrible. Well, and a couple daughters, and I gotta watch my family grieve and process his death. But and when I was, I mean, I get when I was in elementary school, I came home and my brother was crying on the porch. His friend had committed suicide. And at school, he got called down to the principal's office and they said, "Look, we know you were best friends with this kid, and he was in a lot of trouble, and they were going to remove him from his home." And the cops were there in his front yard. They told him, "Go get your clothes, go get your stuff. You're coming with us." And instead of going and getting his clothes and his stuff, he went and got his dad's shotgun. And my mom wouldn't allow me to go to the funeral, and they had to reconstruct half his face. And I remember my brother did go and did talk about it a little bit, and so I got to see death a little bit through my brother's eyes a couple of times because I didn't go to the funerals. But I think I've only been to like maybe a couple of funerals in my life. There was my friend that died 6-7 years ago. I struggled with should I go to her funeral or not, but I ultimately did. I kind of drove in there late. I got to the viewing 15 minutes before it ended. But like I said, I'll talk about that in a later video. Because I want to give her full story. And so yeah, I've got to process death through watching other people, through their behaviors. And it's no wonder that I grew up getting a degree in psychology and stuff, in criminal justice and psychology and human behavior, because a lot of my life I got to experience through other people's behaviors and through their actions and their words and their experiences. And I haven't got to process a lot of things for myself because either people didn't let me, didn't want me to. Like, I remember standing on the church lawn watching my friend's mom's casket get loaded into the hearse, and my mom's like, "I don't want you at that funeral." We were at the church to do genealogy because they had a special computer down there, because this was back in the times before computers. This was the early 90s, late 80s actually. early around 1990, before computers were a home thing. You had to go borrow somebody's computer. And my mom was doing genealogy, and we were playing on the lawn while there was a funeral going on. And I kind of got to stand like 100 yards away or so from a distance, watching. My friend's mom died of, she had a tumor, brain tumor, and her mom died. And I kind of got to watch this from a distance because my mom thought I was too girlish and too gentle of a person and too emotional of a person to go to a funeral and to allow to see these kind of things and process these kind of things. That's why I wasn't allowed to go to my brother's friend's funeral and stuff like that, because my mom thought I was just, too petite, too gentle of a person to allow me to experience these heavy emotional things such as death. And so it's probably no wonder I kind of grew up afraid of death, when I'm gonna die. I saw people die young, I saw people die old, I saw people die various ages and different reasons and scenarios, deaths that should have happened, that shouldn't have happened, stuff like that. And so spoiler warning, I did just talk about suicide, and so, but I've processed it through watching other people process it. And so, by proxy, I kind of process these things. And I processed it as they processed it, and when they were over it, I needed to be over it. But when I was in the 8th grade, we had a reading writing assessment test, and the highest score you could get was a 10. And the first time we took the test, I wasn't feeling well, and they gave us an essay to write. And I just scribbled out I remember the essay I scribbled out. It was the stupidest thing and it made no sense, okay? When I got my test back, I had scored a 4. And they were so mad at the whole school for scoring low that they made us all retake it. Thank God. Because the second time I took it more serious this time. And they gave an essay and the topic was choices. So I talked about my brother's friend that committed suicide. I talked about walking home from school, finding my brother on the porch, talking to my brother, watching him start to cry, process this, the choice that he made and how it affected everybody that was left behind. I scored an 8 out of 10. And on graduation day, only 10 people out of 200 people got certificates for getting 8 or above. One person got 10 out of 10, one person got a 9 out of 10, and then 8 of us got an 8 out of 10. And I think I still have that certificate to this day. I've tried to keep all my certificates. But mice and stuff have tried to eat my certificates. But I got this certificate for getting this 8 out of 10, and they announced only 10 people did this. And they were so proud of us 10 that they had us walk up on the stage at graduation, and we got to stand up there and hold our certificates and be proud that we. So I talk about how I'm not a very good writer. I mean, I couldn't write a novel, but I could write an essay, and if I'm in the right mood. And I did write an essay about death and suicide and choices and the aftermath of it. And when I went on to get my GED, reading was the thing that I almost scored 100% on. I am so good at, reading and analyzing stories. And that was one of my top things that the teacher, when I took my pretest, she's like, okay, all you have to do is work on a little bit of math. Other than that, Rose, you are good to go. And because I did good in social studies and I did good in reading and sciences and everything, I did good enough to pass. And math, I was so nervous when I took that GED because I only studied 2 weeks for it. The GED got surprised on me. I never planned to take it. I had to take a girl to get her GED, and I thought, well, if I got to drive her to get her GED and it's an hour away and I didn't want to come all the way home and then go pick her up an hour later because I wouldn't really get a break. And so I decided, well, you know what, I'm going to go do it too. And I went and did it. And so I studied for 2 weeks at the center that I was taking this girl to. And I took the pretest there, and she said just brush up on your math rows and go do it. And then I went and did it. And surprisingly, I scrambled through that math on that GED and pray to God. And gosh, man, that whole time I was doing the GED math, I mean, I was so nervous 2 weeks waiting for my score because I had to get my results. This was April, and I had to get my results in by May 1st if I wanted to walk with the 2005 graduating class. And I got my results in at the end of April, and it said, guess what? You passed. You got your GED. Here's your certificate. And I got a walk on May 3rd with my class. And that was great. So anyways, let's get back to I've done enough side chatting for now. Hope you enjoyed the side chatting. Let's get back and finish this midnight club. It just sparks, this kind of stuff just sparks so many conversations and so many things in your life that you just need to get out and talk about, you know? Like I said, what my channel is about is getting these stories out.
He has said that there are hints and references that won't make sense until the House of Usher is released. Okay. Maybe the arcade machine in the back of the game room, simply called the House with a decrepit hand, is part of this grand Flanagan conspiracy. And lastly, to describe the Midnight Club as a horror show would not be accurate. It takes more than a couple cues from the horror genre, but the overall story is closer to that of a coming-of-age one.
Horror.
But one thing it does take is a scream queen on the level of Jamie Lee Curtis. Heather Langenkamp fought the Nightmare on Elm Street as Nancy Thompson, but the connection to Nancy doesn't end with a couple bad dreams haunting young adults. Her wardrobe at the start of the Midnight Club as Dr. Stanton is highly reminiscent of her color scheme as Nancy, adorned in pink and white.
You know, I remember when Friday the 13th came out, and then when Johnny Depp became famous, and I found out he was the boy that got sucked in the waterbed. Well, I heard he was in Friday the 13th, and I'm like, okay, think, who? And I was like, was he the boy that got sucked in the waterbed? And I had to go figure it out and look it up, and I'm like, oh my God, he was the kid that got sucked into the waterbed, and I can't believe that, you know, I didn't know him from 21 Jump Street. But as soon as he starred in Friday the 13th, and I rewatched it, and it does say introducing Johnny Depp, and in the credits when the movie starts, and I was like, yes, he is the boy that gets sucked into the waterbed, and I'm like, I can't believe I watched Johnny Depp movies, and knew him before he became hugely famous, before he was the Johnny Depp that everybody knows, and so that was really cool to be like, well, you know, I watched somebody before there was somebody else that I watched a lot of. Who was it that before they became famous? It was, oh yeah, Robert Downey Jr. I loved his movie, like Chances Are, Ally McBeal, stuff like that. Like, I followed his movies, and then when he dropped out of the movie era, like, it was such a sad thing for Ally McBeal. Like, he was supposed to be Allie's partner, and they made good partners, and he, you know, it's just, it's so sad, but then when he made his huge comeback as Iron Man, I was like, as soon as they announced Johnny Depp, like, when they announced, like, Heath Ledger for the Joker, I was like, this rom-com guy is gonna play the Joker, you know, and stuff like that, but when they said Johnny Depp, or when they said, Robert Downey Jr. is gonna be Iron Man, I was like, yeah, because you could see it. You could see it. That this was his role. And I'm so glad that he changed his life around to take on that role, because the MCU wouldn't be the MCU without him. I mean, I don't think it would have been popular if they had cast Tom Cruise or anybody else. I'm sorry, Tom Cruise, but that was Robert Downey Jr.'s role. And he did it fantastically. And I will miss him.
But minus the tattoo on the back of her neck. So here is where I must leave you. It's not for good, as a season 2 is always open. Mike Flanagan even said he wanted to end on a less depressing note. If he stands by his word that the epilogue of the Midnight Club book was a huge inspiration, then we have thousands of years to watch, with the very least
Really?
Alanka and Kevin up on the big screen. Anyways, be sure to like and subscribe for more of us here at Screen Rant. Have a good one.
That's interesting to know that that could go on for. I mean, I am hoping for a season 2 because they didn't close they closed the stories and a lot of the storylines, and okay, a lot of them are still left alive, so you know that they'll start season 2. You don't know if they'll live through season 2 because there are some of them. It's sad, like, okay, so people with cancer could possibly change their diet and whatnot and other things and do chemo and whatnot, and there are some things where they could possibly go into remission and they have some hope of changing, and it's not a death sentence. But there's a couple characters in the Midnight Club that spark a discussion that what they have is a death sentence, like AIDS is a death sentence. Back in 1994, AIDS, they had some pills out to help. Because in the 80s, when it first started coming around, it was like you were going to die within a year or so. Like, it was a death sentence. And then they got a little better in the 90s about it, got some funding. You know, they got out there, they worked their butts off, they got some fundings, they got people to be less afraid of AIDS, they got the information out there to the public, the real information about AIDS, they educated people, they got funding, and, you know, great movies like Philadelphia and stuff brought out more education and stuff, and, I mean, later on, AIDS became less of a death sentence. HIV became manageable to where it may not turn into AIDS, and AIDS became more manageable. But back in 1994 was an iffy time because they were getting better, but they weren't also at the same time they weren't as advanced as they are now. Because now people, it's hardly talked about anymore. Like, when we talk about the LGBTQ community, AIDS isn't the first thing that comes to your mind anymore. Back in the 80s and 90s, when you talked about the LG community, that was the first thing that came up in your mind. And you're like, oh, when you say the words, you know, the LG community, what do you think of people immediately? You're like, yeah, AIDS, you know. And so so back in 94, it was still a death sentence. It was, this ain't retractable, there's not much help for you. There's, as they portray in the show, there are some meds that can suppress some of the symptoms, maybe help you live longer, but you see the meds also start to fail and the lesions start to come out, and he hides it at first, but also you get to see his character arc a little bit in the show where, yeah, at the beginning, you know, his mom wouldn't accept him, he had a hard time accepting himself. Now, he got lucky in the show that his mom did come around, that was part of his character arc, that he got strong enough to confront her, and because most moms would have just kicked you out of the house, and you know, that wouldn't have happened. And so he got really lucky that people with those religious convictions and stuff, that deep in their convictions that they would turn on their own son, usually are hard to get them to step away from that conviction. And so he's very, very lucky. And it was nice to see his character arc and to see him. But the other character, unfortunately, with what's going on in his brain, is we saw him get past his death date, and character arc of him growing, but now it's been that year that the doctors told him, and they told him 1 year, and he didn't die technically within that 365 days, but it was after that 1 year mark that he started going downhill, and they said once the downhill signs happen, they happen fast, and it goes fast, and death is now going to come fast. So we know that he might not live that long into season 2, because he's got something also that is not retractable, that also will spark a discussion. There's no way to change its turnaround. They didn't say exactly what it was called. I don't know what it was called. But it'd be interesting to look it up. But he it's really it's sad to see that, okay, yeah, there's no hope in a couple of the kids on the show, that there's no hope of something coming out. Like, they even told the kid with AIDS, they said, look, in a year or two they might come out with better meds, but he might not have a year or two, and until he's better. And the other kid, forgive me for not remembering all their names. My memory's slipping nowadays. Um, his brain thing is a deterioration thing that doesn't just can stop at one point. And once your brain starts to get eaten away at and deteriorate, you can't retract that deterioration. Once brain damage happens, there's no way to regrow that part of the brain. There's no way to retract that. There's no way to change it. Um and that's where people start talking about cryogenics. Just freeze me now, and when you come up with a cure, unfreeze me and cure me. And that's why they have the whole, either freeze your whole body or just freeze your head, your brain. And when we come up with a cure for what's going on with your brain, we'll unfreeze you and cure you. And which brings into another really good story, a movie I really do love. We'll have to do a movie kind of watch of Vanilla Sky. That is a good Tom Cruise movie. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this review watch with me, and watch The Midnight Club. It really does spark great discussion of different scenarios in which teens have to come to terms with. Is what I have, am I allowed to have hope? Is there hope? Or is this a death sentence? That, I mean, you get to see one of them go home, and Dr. Stanton talks about, I almost forgot her name. They've said it a few times though. Dr. Stanton talks to him about, she talks to Ivanka about, okay, you overheard my phone call, but don't tell anybody, don't give anybody this, she didn't say these words, but basically false hope. Because if you go tell everybody that somebody's going home, just like you watch Ivanka go sit at the table and go, you guys, it's probably me because I did the ritual, and the chick in the woods told me I got a brighter aura about me, and it's me. And it was just all part of Shasta's, or Jane, whatever her name is. It was all part of her manipulation to actually get Ivanka to give her life for her cure, because she's sick again and she thinks she needs this magical cure again that may or may not work. And I don't know if Ivanka got a total awakening from that. Her character arc is kind of weird because I don't think she gets that aha moment that Dr. Stanton was hoping about, okay, you just been used. You're vulnerable. in your state and you've just been used, and you should feel horrible right now about that, and you should be hating this woman that used you. Yet she kind of sticks up for her, because she's still hooked on this miracle cure. But the way the show ends, we don't know where Dr. Stanton actually stands on it. If she's using these kids too, or if she's sincere, because you would like to think, because she saves Ivanka and everything, and she fights this other woman, and she takes care of these children all the way up until the very last moment in the show. You think, okay, she's a good guy. She is on the side of good. She's a good guy. She's giving her life to take care of these children, and then that last scene just blows your mind for a second, going, wait a second. Don't tell me she's ahead of this place to use these kids too, and she's just in competition with Jane or subtly working with Jane. You don't know. Because every time Ivanka left the house, how did Shasta know? She could be getting a phone call from Dr. Stanton, because Dr. Stanton's eyes are everywhere. And nothing goes on in that home without Dr. Stanton's notice. So, I mean, it'll be interesting, because Ivanka still has a character arc to go through. Hers is not over. She still has stuff to go through. And so it'll be interesting to see how they go. Kevin breaking up with his girlfriend was an interesting part of his character arc, because it was something that you wonder if he should. I mean, this girl is more than willing to stand by his side until death or cure, but she's there, good or bad. And he does decide to eventually, especially because the rude thing that Ivanka did, he decides to technically let her off the hook of having a sick boyfriend. And it's really hard. I mean, like I said, I watched somebody go through it. They stayed with, instead of getting a divorce, she stayed with her husband to help him through his cancer, even though they hated each other and were going to get a divorce, but they stayed together. And so it happens. People do stay with you till the end, or there's a cure, or I mean, we don't know much about Catherine's story. We know that she's there for him. We don't know exactly what's her motivation for staying. I mean, does she really love him that much? And is she hoping on a cure, or is she there to hold his hand to the end so he's never alone? He gets to experience, having a girlfriend, going to prom. He got to be prom king. She gave him a lot of experiences that he ran track and stuff, so you never know. He might have become prom king had he not, gotten sick, because, I mean, he ran track and stuff, and it's those people that are in those extracurricular things and that stand out that get to be the prom king and queen. And, so this show just sparks a lot of discussion about different kinds of deaths at different kinds of ages, and how to process it, and how did you process death in your life and other people's lives, and good or bad experiences. Like I said, I may have experienced some people who have let people die on purpose for one reason or another, and it's sad because they're gone from this world when they might not have needed to be gone from this world. And But is it a good or a bad thing? Because how would their life had gone if they were still here? But I mean, they deserve that chance to still live that life, whatever it may have been. And so, yeah, this show sparks a lot of it should spark a lot of discussion and emotion and talk and feelings and, you know, process, help people process things that they may have not processed, or talk about things that they already processed from a healthy standpoint after it's been processed. And it's just, this show's a good way to, help other people process things if you've already processed it, to empathize with people, to sympathize with people, to bring your own dark stories, or tell people stories, or learn how to be there for somebody. Maybe somebody in your life just started going through this and you don't know how to help them. Well, watch this show, read these books. You may learn how to help somebody process this, and how you should also process this in a healthy manner. Just know in the show when people are being used, and when people are being treated badly, and when people are being treated correctly, and people are doing what's healthy, and when people are acting not healthy. And this sparks a discussion between what is healthy behavior during this time, and what is not healthy behavior during this time. And so it's a good show. So let's have a discussion in the comments. What is healthy? What is not healthy? What have you processed? What do you still need to process? What not? Also, if you want to email me your story, I will tell you your story. And later on this week, I am going to come out with my friend's story, who was murdered 6-7 years ago, and going through helping her and her oldest son go through the process, because he was kind of estranged from his mother in a way, yet he was next of kin, and he had to. I helped him plan his mother's funeral, because he did not know what to do, because it was laid all in his lap, because he was next of kin, and she didn't have an advance directive or anything. She didn't plan on dying. She was murdered at, I think she was like 52, 54, young still, technically. Um, and it wasn't her time. It was far from her time. So I will go into her story later this week. Look for that when I post a true crime video about her. Sorry, I won't be doing my makeup or anything. I'm just not good at makeup. I didn't grow up very much as a girly girl, and so that's something I still have to process. So, anyways, hope you enjoyed watching this with me, and we'll watch other things later, and you have a good rest of your day. And just post in in the comments what you need to, and please keep it positive. Remember, people are processing things, and there's technically no right or wrong way to process things. There is a healthy way to process things, and we should help each other process things in a healthy way. Let's keep our personalities and our behaviors and our talk healthy. And thank you for watching.